Alan Watts reveals the hidden contradiction that rules your life. We spend our lives chasing freedom while secretly enslaving ourselves to the very thing we claim to despise, the idea of control. Have you ever noticed how we set goals, make plans, and carve every minute into to-do lists, only to feel more trapped by our schedules and deadlines? I've been there, pushing with all my might toward an imagined utopia of perfect outcomes, only to realize that the harder I pressed, the less alive I felt. This contradiction, our desperate striving for freedom through absolute control, lurks beneath the surface of our daily choices, guiding our actions with the subtlety of a puppet master. We believe we're masters of our destiny, but in truth, we allow our fear of uncertainty to dictate every moment. What if the very act of clenching the reins tighter is what creates our suffering? In the first minute of life's unfolding, we glimpse this paradox play out in the simplest forms. A parent meticulously schedules playtime for a child, forgetting that spontaneity is the essence of childhood joy. A student obsesses over a perfect exam score, only to discover that real learning thrives in the space between right and wrong answers. These examples illustrate the universal dilemma. We want structure to feel safe, yet structure can become a prison. I remember sitting at my desk, surrounded by color-coded calendars and productivity apps, convinced that each new tool would unlock my potential, only to watch my creativity and well-being wither under the tyranny of timetables. The deeper insight here is that control and freedom are not opposite ends of the spectrum, but two sides of the same coin. We cannot pluck one without the other. Attempting to sever them leads to imbalance. As we move into a more reflective inquiry, consider the moment you last felt genuinely alive. Was it during a meticulously planned event, or did it happen in a spontaneous burst, a sudden rain shower that transformed a walk into a dance, an unexpected phone call that opened your heart? These flashes of presence remind us that aliveness arises not from perfect execution, but from the interplay between intention and openness. Alan Watts described life as music, composed with structure yet flowing with improvisation. If you insist on playing only the written notes and ignore the spaces between, you miss the melody's soul. How might your life change if you treated uncertainty as the silent rhythm that gives shape to every note you play?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
To bring this philosophical revelation into practical life, I challenge you to perform one simple experiment. Choose a routine task, a commute, a chore, and a work ritual, and deliberately leave one element unscheduled. Arrive a few minutes early, then resist the urge to fill the gap with more planning. Notice how your mind reacts. Does it feel exposed, anxious, or exhilarated by the new possibility? Over time, you'll train yourself to tolerate and even relish the open spaces of life. This isn't an excuse to disregard responsibilities, but an invitation to infuse every moment with the vitality that only uncertainty can provide. The goal is to embody freedom within structure, to dance on the edge of control without falling off. But now, as we intensify our examination, we uncover how this hidden contradiction manifests in our relationships. We demand loyalty and predictability from our friends and partners, fearful of abandonment, yet we resent any constraints on our autonomy. We yearn for deep intimacy, but erect walls that keep others at arm's length, terrified of losing ourselves in another person's story. I recall a time when I resisted fully committing to a friendship, citing my need for personal space, only to wonder why genuine connection felt so elusive. The paradox revealed itself. My insistence on self-sovereignty prevented the very closeness I craved. Real freedom, Watts taught, is found not in isolation but in the paradoxical blend of giving ourselves away and remaining rooted in our essence. When you next feel tension between the desire for independence and the need for connection, pause and ask yourself, what fear is driving my stance? Are you clinging to control because you fear losing your identity, or are you retreating into solitude to avoid vulnerability? By naming the underlying fear, you dissolve its power and open a path toward authentic engagement. Try this practice in your next conversation with someone you care about. Share your hidden fear of losing control, fear of being hurt, fear of merging too deeply. Witness how vulnerability becomes the bridge between self-rule and shared life, how surrendering control in a moment of honesty paradoxically strengthens your bond. The art of harmonizing opposites, turning your greatest contradiction into creative power. We've identified the hidden contradiction, our quest for freedom through control, and now we face the challenge of transforming that tension into a source of vitality. Imagine two opposing forces, like north and south poles, whose magnetic field only becomes visible in the space between them. That field is where energy thrives. In your life, control and surrender are like those poles. Rather than choosing one at the expense of the other, we can learn to play them against each other, generating a creative spark that fuels our growth. I once struggled to balance discipline and spontaneity. I would plan a rigid morning routine only to rebel midweek, feeling stifled and guilty. What if, instead, I wove choice into the routine itself, reserving specific windows for unplanned exploration? This simple act turned a battleground of willpower into a laboratory of discovery. Where in your life are you forcing a false dichotomy that, if integrated, could become your most potent ally? To apply this principle practically, start by identifying a domain where you habitually oscillate between extremes. Perhaps you swing from overworking to binge-watching distraction, or from strict budgeting to impulsive spending. Choose one pattern and map its poles, control at one end, surrender at the other. Now, design an experiment where you intentionally occupy the midpoint, oscillating deliberately and mindfully. For example, allocate 45 minutes of focused work, then 15 minutes of unstructured play, repeating this cycle throughout your day. Observe how your productivity and creativity shift when you honor both needs. Rather than feeling fragmented, you'll find a dynamic equilibrium, a self-sustaining rhythm that reflects the natural pulse of life itself. How might this tailored oscillation transform your energy, your mood, your results? This harmonizing isn't a static compromise, but an active dialogue. Alan Watts likened existence to a symphony where tension and resolution create the music's beauty. In our personal symphony, resistance against flow creates the harmonic richness that prevents life from becoming dull. When you resist too little, you drift aimlessly. When you resist too much, you erupt in frustration. The magic happens in the push-pull interplay. I remember a creative block that lasted weeks. I tried to force ideas, scribbling outlines furiously, then abandoned the project entirely. Finally, I alternated between bursts of writing and deliberate rest, long walks, daydreaming, and watched the idea blossom in those in-between spaces. The contradiction itself became the catalyst. Can you recall a similar breakthrough that emerged only after you stopped fighting so hard? As we approach the mid-video intensity of our personal narrative, embrace this practice in your relationships as well. We cling to people for security yet crave autonomy, leading to conflict. Instead of swinging between clingy attachment and distant withdrawal, practice interleaved connection, Choose moments of deep presence, listening fully, then sharing vulnerably, followed by deliberate space for individual pursuits. Schedule a weekly shared silence session. Sit together without talking, each with your own activity: reading, sketching, meditating, and simply enjoy parallel presence. Notice how this ritual dissolves tension, honoring both intimacy and independence. What would it feel like if your closest relationships became a dance of proximity and distance, each step strengthening the bond rather than wearing it thin? We now introduce a second re-engagement spark. Watts once observed that the Taoist sage is both active and passive, leading without force, guiding without control. This paradoxical leadership model applies to how we lead our own lives. Are you the boss who micromanages every detail, or the laissez-faire director who abdicates responsibility? The enlightened path weaves guidance and receptivity. Set clear intentions, then follow the feedback of experience. In practice, when guiding a team or managing your own goals, articulate your vision, outline the next 2 steps, then step back to gather input. This co-creative approach harnesses collective intelligence and keeps you aligned with unfolding reality. In what area of your life could you shift from a unilateral commander to a collaborative conductor? The final secret of harmonizing opposites is to cultivate playful awareness. When we treat control as a game rather than a battle, tension transforms into delight. I challenge you to frame your next challenge: public speaking, a tough conversation, a fitness goal as a playful experiment. Assign points for creative risks, unexpected pivots, or moments of genuine openness. Invite friends to join, turning responsibility into shared fun. Notice how this reframing dissolves fear and amplifies engagement. Play reclaims the spontaneity we lost when we took ourselves too seriously. What would happen if you approached your life's contradictions not as problems to solve, but as puzzles to enjoy? By mastering the art of harmonizing control and freedom, you convert your deepest contradiction into a reservoir of creative power. You stop living on one extreme and discover the fertile territory between. You learn to ride the current of life with both intention and openness, structure and flow, discipline and whimsy. This synthesis doesn't eradicate tension, it celebrates it, using it as the engine of purpose. And as your life's melody builds toward its crescendo, you'll find that what once felt like a hidden curse is actually your greatest gift. The mirror of choice, how your perceptions create or dissolve your reality. We live inside a hall of mirrors, every reflection colored by our beliefs, fears, and desires. But I've witnessed how 2 people can share the same moment: rain pattering on a car roof, a friend's offhand comment, or a crowded morning commute, and yet inhabit entirely different realities. One sees inconvenience and injustice, the other discovers a chance to practice patience. This divergence isn't magic, it's the power of perception. Alan Watts reminded us that the menu is not the meal. Our mental interpretations are recipes we follow, but they are not reality itself. What would happen if you treated each thought as a guest passing through your awareness rather than the host commanding your house? The first practical step toward mastering this mirror effect is noticing when your mind labels an experience good or bad. You might call receiving criticism bad, yet that same feedback could be the doorway to mastery. I once felt crushed by a harsh performance review, only to realize later that it illuminated blind spots I would never have seen otherwise. By shifting from judgment to curiosity, asking "what can I learn here?" we transform adversity into alchemy. I challenge you now, Recall a recent event that triggered discomfort. Can you reframe it as a teacher rather than a tormentor? Our perceptions also shape our sense of identity. We cling to self-stories: I'm unlovable, I'm a failure, I must be perfect, and then live out those scripts as if they were gospel. Yet beneath every story lies a deeper awareness that transcends narrative. Through practices like journaling or mindful observation, we can catch the moment our inner critic speaks and choose whether to believe its verdict. A simple exercise: whenever you catch yourself thinking I am X, pause and append, is thinking I am X. But this tiny linguistic tweak creates space between you and the thought, revealing that you are not your limiting beliefs. What self-narrative have you been playing on repeat, and how might your life shift if you edited the script? As we deepen our exploration, notice how perception influences relationships. We often project assumptions onto others, seeing care as control, honesty as aggression, silence as indifference. In my own relationships, I've discovered that misinterpretations can fracture trust more quickly than any actual betrayal. The remedy lies in pausing before we react, inviting clarification. When you said that, I felt X. Is that what you intended? This question reframes conflict from accusation to inquiry, dissolving illusions and opening genuine connection. How often have misunderstandings been disasters in your mind, but simply misreadings of intent? Perception even governs how we relate to possibility and fear. We imagine catastrophic outcomes: public humiliation, failure, rejection, and then speak about our lives as though those fantasies were prophecies. Yet probabilities and imaginations are not the same. To counter this, cultivate the practice of evidence harvesting. List 3 facts that support a positive outcome, then list 3 that support a feared outcome. Weigh them honestly. You'll often see that your dread is built on speculation, while your hopes have firmer footing. I used this method before launching a public talk, and it calmed my nerves by showing that most fears were mere shadows. What terror could you dissipate today through a clear-eyed inventory of facts? This part of our journey crescendos in the realization that perception is choice. Every moment offers the freedom to interpret experience anew. Rather than being passive victims of circumstance, we become active artists, painting our internal landscape. The mirror still reflects, but we decide whether to stare at the cracks or the light streaming through. As Sally Kempton, a modern mystic, teaches, "You're the sky, thoughts are merely clouds drifting across." When you glimpse that sky, you stand in unshakable freedom, embracing the ultimate paradox, transcending contradiction to live fully free. We have traced the hidden contradiction of control and freedom, learned to harmonize opposites, and recognize that our perceptions shape the world we inhabit. Now we face the grand synthesis, the paradox that to live fully free, we must embrace contradiction itself as the very essence of freedom. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon, feeling both the exhilaration of possibility and the vertigo of empty space. That tension between excitement and fear is not a flaw to be fixed, but a threshold of transformation. When we lean into the paradox, neither denying our need for structure nor rejecting the mystery of the unknown, we step into a realm where life's energy flows unimpeded. Alan Watts likened this stance to the poise of a tightrope walker. The slightest stiffening of posture brings a fall, yet too much laxity yields collapse. The trick is to relax into vigilance, to be alert and supple at once. In your own life, consider a goal you've pursued with unrelenting focus, only to find your passion diminish as you neared completion. That's the paradox. Intensity breeds both momentum and burnout. To transcend it, incorporate restorative tension into your routine, a practice of alternating high engagement with deep repose. After a burst of concentrated work, pause with a ritual, sip tea slowly, watch a single bird in flight, hum a favorite tune. Let the tension settle like ripples on water, readying you for the next surge. How might your productivity and joy transform if you wove these pauses into every ambition? The ultimate paradox also applies to our search for meaning. We chase purpose as if it were a hidden treasure to be unearthed, yet purpose emerges when we fully inhabit each moment, paradoxically dissolving the very quest for it. When I ceased striving for meaningful moments and simply showed up listening attentively to friends, noticing the curve of a leaf, offering kindness without agenda, I encountered a depth of significance that no deliberate search could manufacture. But what if purpose is not a destination but the living of life itself, paradoxically revealed when we stop seeking it? In relationships, transcending contradiction means loving without clinging and respecting boundaries without withdrawing. It means showing up for someone with full presence, yet allowing them the space to breathe freely. I practice this by sharing my own vulnerabilities while honoring my partner's need for solitude, and discovered that our bond grew stronger, richer, more expansive. Can you imagine a relationship where intimacy and autonomy are not competing needs but complementary forces that fuel trust? At the deepest level, embracing paradox invites us to discover that the self is both actor and witness, finite form and infinite awareness. You are the wave dancing on the ocean, and you are the ocean itself. You are the story unfolding, and you are the storyteller. This dual identity is not a contradiction to resolve, but a mystery to be lived. The practical life advice: cultivate moments of metacognition, stepping back from your own story to witness it. During a challenging moment, ask, who is noticing this challenge? Feel the presence that observes without judgment. That presence is your true home, where contradictions harmonize into freedom. Now I ask you a super deep question: if you could hold two truths that seem completely opposed, fear and love, action and surrender, self and other, how might your life expand when you resist the urge to choose? What new possibilities would arise if you lived each day embracing the dance of paradox rather than seeking a singular answer? In the closing act of our philosophical odyssey, remember that the greatest achievements often arise when we pair bold vision with a spirit of play, ambitious scale with genuine humility. In the same way, your life's most profound successes will emerge when you use paradox as a creative force, wield control with flexibility, embrace freedom without chaos, and pursue your aims with an open, curious heart. The hidden contradiction that once governed your choices will become the engine of your deepest aliveness. So stand at the canyon's edge with open arms, heart pounding with both trepidation and exhilaration. Feel the paradox under your feet, the tension that holds you upright. Step forward, knowing that each contradiction you embrace is a bridge to a more expansive truth. In living the paradox, you live fully free.